All right, hello everybody. It looks like I should be live now, so welcome everybody for tuning in. And we'll get started in just a second. Give a few minutes to let people kind of trickle in. But while we're waiting, let me know if you can hear me clearly down below in the chat. Drop maybe a one or a thumbs up on the like button as well. Let me go ahead and mute this. And great to see everybody. Frank, how's it going? Shyam, nice to see you. Trio, how's it going? Adil, thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for those ones. It's a little bit delayed, so bear with me here. But basically, this is going to be a live kind of stock market outlook video, as well as basically a stocks to watch, weekly watch list, that type of thing. I kind of spread the net pretty wide this week, so we'll basically see how things lie. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Great to see some familiar faces. Manoli, how's it going? Nick, how's it going? Susan, good to see you. Yeah, at the very end, I'll be taking some kind of live chart requests. So make sure you guys get those in. And in the meantime, make sure you guys hit the like button. I'm basically going to try to do a little bit more live streams. I've been kind of straying away from it over the past few months, but I'm trying to get back into it. So maybe we'll make this a regular Sunday night thing. I know it's Monday today, but obviously the market was closed today. So let me know in the comment section if you'd like to see more of this. And Scott, just as I was saying, I'm going to try to do more of this, but usually it will be on Sunday nights. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you guys all once again for tuning in with me. We've got 64 people. That's awesome. And let's dive in and just start a little bit with the overall market indexes. So let me get over to here and let's go and start with the NASDAQ composite. So before I say anything, I just want to let you guys kind of tell me in the chat, what do you think the overall trend is of this chart? And think about kind of where we are with respect to moving averages, whether we're above or below them. Think about the volume and price action itself, and whether we're seeing, signs of accumulation or signs of distribution. And I'm going to wait to see a few answers in the chat here before I get started. And we see Darshil saying uptrend. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but let me know your thoughts down below in the chat. And there we go. We see some bearish trends in here, downtrend, nice. So you can keep it very simple when looking at the overall trend of the market. Are we above or below the 21 EMA? Is it rising or falling? Look at the 50 SMA and look at the 200-day. And right now we're below a declining 21 EMA, 50 SMA, and 200 SMA. And it's just kind of a different environment than what we saw over the past 2 years or so. Now we may be a little bit stretched below this moving average, and we'll kind of get into that later on in this live stream, this video, whatever you want to call it. But right now the trend is not necessarily in basically the bull's favor, and less is more right now, especially if you're a position trader or investor. Looking over at the S&P 500, let's take a look at that chart as well. Looks pretty much the same thing, if not a little bit more kind of negative here below those moving averages. And let me see if there's any comments here. Yeah, stage 4 downtrend, 100% agree. We're below a declining 200-day moving average. That's pretty much the definition here. And we're just seeing a lot of distribution. And just going over to the small caps as well, this is kind of interesting because if we go back to the NASDAQ or the SPY, that kind of broke down basically at the start of this year. But the small caps have really been showing this weakness really ever since, if we go back to a weekly chart, ever since this period here where we really started changing trend in the small caps. And right now you can see, and let me actually zoom in here so you can actually see that we're below this key level. And we've just been in a downtrend really since this failed breakout right here. So the failed breakout is often kind of the first warning sign here. And then of course we break those moving averages, break that line of support. And now we're just in a downtrend below these moving averages. So we'll have to see whether, we start to build out here and form some type of bear market rally or, basically try to rally into these moving averages. But we don't have to predict. All we have to do is manage risk along the way and follow that trend. So that's the IWM. And just looking at the IWO in general, I like to take a look at this ETF because it gives more of a sense of what the smaller cap growth is doing. And this trend, just like the IWM is down, we're below declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA. So definitely right now, I think less is more, especially if you're a position trader. Cash is 100% a position. And if you're kind of a can slim type trader, most likely we're waiting for that significant fall through day where all the market leadership is shaping up and is in uptrends. And that's when we really want to get aggressive. Right now, we're just kind of in no man's land at this point. Now, if you're a short-term trader, probably you've been trying to play these quick moves here. You could have gone long here, gotten a nice chunk here, and then when we broke down, played it to the short side. I'm not quite there yet. I'm trying to get to that point better at shorting and being kind of a two-way trader. But there's definitely a lot of money to be made within these short rallies. I did quite well during the March rally. I made some decent gains here as well. Nothing substantial, but I think the number one thing to remember is during a bear market correction, less is more, size down, and the number one thing that you want to be focused on is preservation of your capital and preservation of your confidence as well. Because if you're not used to playing the short side or playing for these quick 2, 3, 5 day moves, it's going to mess with your confidence if you have a lot of losses in a row. And then when we finally do get that confirmation with the fall through day and the leaders are all shaping up, you might not be basically in the mental state where you're ready to take advantage of that. So keep that in mind. Specialization is the way to go when it comes to trading. And don't feel like you have to be involved in every single stock, every single move in the market. Play to your strengths and keep that in mind. I think that's super, super important. So let me just see if there's any questions coming in. And yeah, I think we can go ahead and move on. I also like to take a look at the FFTY, the Innovator IBD50 ETF. This just gives a kind of another glimpse at what growth is doing. And like the IWM, the IWO, this has really been in a downtrend since this point right here. And we're just below all the key moving averages at this point. So that's pretty much it for the major ETFs. And I just want to pause for any questions about the indexes overall. So let me know if you have any down below in the chat. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and click that like button. I would really, really appreciate it. And of course, subscribe if you haven't yet to my channel. I think I've got some great educational material. My interviews, I'm sure many of you know, that's my favorite type of video to make. And we've got a bunch more coming starting next week. So look forward to that. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those. So I see a question here from Charlie. Talk about Dr. Wish's T2108 indicator. Perfect. That's exactly what I was going to do. So let me go ahead and open up TC2000 here and give me 1 second. And there we go. So let me know if you guys see T2108 on the screen. I believe you should be able to. And yeah, I think guys should be able to. So let's go ahead and bring up T2108. And first things first, I'll kind of talk about what this overall indicator represents and basically how I use it. So first things first, it basically represents the percentage of stocks above the 40-day, their 40-day moving averages. So it's not the 50-day, it's not the 21 EMA, but it's kind of a representation of that intermediate term. And excuse me, it's basically a representation of the breadth in the market in the New York Stock Exchange. And the key relevant levels here, if you scroll back in time, is kind of this 10 level. And then also in those really significant corrections, bear markets, the 5 level here. And at that point, you might start looking for, an intermediate bottom to form and potentially a tradable rally. And let me actually go ahead and change it to an arithmetic chart. So it looks a little bit cleaner here. So you can see back in the 2020 correction, we got all the way basically to 1%. So that's extremely, extremely low in terms of this indicator. And going over to a weekly chart, you can see going back to the significant corrections, here's 2016. Here is 2008, 2009. You can see during these significant corrections and even these intermediate corrections, we get below that 10 mark and also that 5 level. So basically what I use is these key levels. And when it gets to this area here, I'm watching for price action confirmation and the development of leadership. And if so, I might buy a little bit of QQQ or even the SSO or TQQQ and try to play as the indexes kind of rebounds upwards and add as it confirms upwards. So that's something to watch here. Also, just at that point, you can start looking for more setups. If there are setups, then you can get a little bit more aggressive, use progressive exposure, and basically try to play that uptrend that could possibly be forming. But I think the most important thing is whenever you're entering a stock or an index or an ETF, whatever, you have to manage risk and know that you're risking your capital and position size accordingly, especially when you're just going from cash. So basically, don't put on too much size too quickly, and make sure that you're kind of risking as you go from 5% positions to 10% positions to 20% positions, and make sure you've got that kind of cushion working for you. Now, in In terms of another indicator I watch, it's the T2106, another basically TC2000 proprietary indicator. And this is basically the McClellan oscillator. And it's just kind of another metric in terms of whether the market is oversold or basically, to extend to the upside as well. And right now we're right at this level where, intermediate swings tend to occur. So on both the T2108 as well as the T2106, we are at those levels where we could potentially see some type of bounce. Now I think it's really dangerous to just say, oh, the market is oversold, I have to buy, especially during a really significant correction bear market like this. So always wait for price confirmation and always manage risk accordingly. That's extremely important. So that's pretty much these two indicators. Definitely interesting things to study and add to your toolbox. Yeah, I see the MFFI is similar for TradingView. MMFI is similar for TradingView users. Absolutely. And let me see if there's any questions here. So Ronak is asking, how did the T2108 do during the 2008 bear market as well as the 2000 and 2002? I showed that briefly, but let me go ahead and zoom in T2108. And let's go back to a weekly chart. So this is the 2000 correction. And if we go back here, this is 2008. So there are a few times where it got below 10. So it got below 10 right here at July 11th of 2008. Then for a few weeks, it was below basically 5 here down in October of 2008. And then lastly, we had a push lower under 10 here in March of 13. So you'd have to see kind of how the market was reacting here. So it looks like at this point we had a little bit of a move up, then we got extremely oversold, had a little bit of move up once again, and then this last push under that 10 mark, that's when we finally had that intermediate term bottom and started pushing off the lows. Then in 2000, you can see where we got below that 10 level right here, where we had a little bit of an uptrend, and then once again a little bit of an uptrend here. So it doesn't always mark the bottom, but it is something to be watching in order to assess that breadth of the overall market. And you can see just the decline overall this year, especially before the market topped, we saw a decline in the T2108, which is another way to use this overall indicator. Yep, just seeing if there's any questions here. I have no idea if we're close to a bottom. We could be close to a bounce, but I'm going to let the price action be my guide as well as the development of leadership. And that's another thing I think I should talk about a little bit in this live stream is kind of what I'm looking for right now. And let me actually go ahead and bring up an article that I wrote here. And I just posted this. I'll put the link in the chat here. But basically, what am I looking for right now? And this is from this article, this stock market outlook video that I just posted. So if you aren't yet subscribed to this, I'll put it in the chat here. But basically, what I'm looking for now is divergences. I'm looking for relative strength. I'm looking for individual stocks as well as groups to start to develop and basically buck the overall downtrend. And we could kind of start to see that last week or the last few weeks where the market made a new all-time, or not all-time, but yearly low. And then individual groups kind of bucked that overall trend and stayed above those past lows. So two basically overall groups that I was watching that kind of stood out to me last week was the solar names as well as XBI, kind of the biotech area of the market. And we saw a lot of those groups, buck the overall trend, stay above their moving averages, stay above those lows, as the overall market kind of got pulled under that key level. So I'm looking for, higher lows versus the market. I'm looking for stocks making new relative strength highs in this type of market. I'm looking for stocks staying above those moving averages, and basically different ways to find that relative strength. And once we identify a few of those leaders and overall groups that are acting well, that's where you kind of want to focus your attention if we do see kind of more and more development of setups and breakouts from sound bases. I think it's really key to be very patient in this type of environment. You don't want to just dive right in because we are seeing significant damage. And of course, the Fed isn't quite with us as of right now. So I think less is more right now. And we really have to see that confirmation from the stocks as well as the indexes before we really get aggressive. So I think my last point here is really important. Have patience, preserve your mental and financial capital, and be ready. Keep in mind that stocks can shape up faster than we think. So keep doing your routines, your weekly scans, and keep a fresh list of stocks to watch. So let's see if there's any questions here. And while I'm pausing, make sure you guys go ahead and leave a like on this live stream. I'd really appreciate it. And of course, subscribe if you haven't yet. And it looks like we've got 170 people in here. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. Hopefully you guys take away something new. And if you have any questions whatsoever, happy to take them. And at the very end, I'll be taking some chart requests as well. So that's pretty much it for this quick article. Definitely go ahead and give it a quick read through. Another significant thing is we saw sentiment kind of get to a new extreme that we haven't quite seen. We finally got it above that 1.15 level, the put call ratio, and the name exposure index also decreasing. So from a contrarian point of view, there's a couple indicators suggesting that we could see some type of balance, but once again, confirmation from price is the most important thing. So with that said, let's go over back here and let's actually go ahead and look through some charts back in MarketSmith. So let's go back to a daily chart. Let's zoom back out here. And the list I'm going to be going through has about 50 names on here, actually 50 exactly. And just going through my screens, going through the, MarketSmith Growth 250, going through the Minervini templates, some other watch lists and screens that I use. These are kind of 50 names that stood out to me. It doesn't mean that they're buyable right here. It doesn't mean that they're high quality, super high quality. Just they're kind of the best looking charts around. So let me know your thoughts on some of these names as I go through them. And if there's any other names that you think I should keep an eye on, let me know as well in the chat section. And I'm just pausing to see if there are any questions here. Yes, I'll definitely take a look at Zoom because that's kind of actually been bucking the overall downtrend as well. So we'll definitely take a look at that. And yeah, I don't see any questions here. There's a question actually from Craig. Is it okay to hold leverage ETFs for a few weeks? That's an individual situation. I can't give you financial advice here. You just got to manage your risk as well. Through stop losses as well as position sizing. During a correction where it's extremely volatile, leverage ETFs are difficult to trade, so keep that in mind. But as a market confirms uptrend, you can always kind of use those leverage ETFs to ride that trend if you don't find individual stocks. So let's see, any other questions? Do you ever trade options? I do not, only individual shares. I definitely want to learn how to trade options a little bit more, but right now my focus is just on individual stocks. And if you look at the best performers in the USIC, often they're just trading stocks. So if you can get that type of performance, just trading shares, there's no real need to increase your leverage too much. Yep, I see Charlie also saying that he knows a few bios on his screen. I definitely did as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into these names. And they're not really organized in any type of way. Let's actually go alphabetical here, keep it kind of easy. And let's go ahead and start with ACC. Some of these charts are better than others, and ACC I think was actually a mistake because it looks like a buyout. So let's go ahead and start with ADMA. And keep in mind, some of these aren't super liquid. So keep an eye on this as well as the price. You can see this is only $2 a share. There's a biotech. So this is pretty much too illiquid for me to trade. I'm looking for at least kind of that $20 million volume. And I prefer over 50, even $100 million volume. So keep an eye on that because right here, I was just kind of looking for the overall chart, not necessarily kind of restricting that dollar volume. And definitely I find better success trading kind of those more liquid names. So that is ADMA. A nice breakout, nice move here, along with kind of the rest of the biotech group last week. With biotechs, you got to be careful because there is that gap down risk. So do your own research and manage that risk through position sizing because these can be extremely, extremely volatile. AERC, you can't really see it from this daily chart just because we're so zoomed out, but this has been a monster off the bottom here. You can see RS rating 99. Let's actually go over to a 60-minute chart. You can see the super strong push on volume. And if you're one of those quicker traders, I'm sure you could find a lot of nice spots here, inside bar and up here, as well as this kind of base breakout on a 60-minute. But this has been a monster, but once again, very volatile. So if you're taking advantage of kind of day trading and swings like this, this can be a great vehicle here. It's seen a lot of volume and super strong price action as well. But keep in mind, this is, once again, pretty volatile, and you could just have a gap down of 20-30% out of nowhere. So keep that in mind. Moving on, let's talk about AGTI. So this is medical services. A nice push over this kind of low cheat area here. So this could be one to watch as it tries to kind of build out a base. Maybe has a few contractions before attempting this 23-25 pivot and going over to a weekly chart, you can see that it's just been kind of basing for a long time. So honestly, you could just set an alert right below this key level, below 26. And, the significant move for this stock is going to happen when it breaks through those all-time highs. And I'm looking at the earnings. It's had huge earnings back here, but it's actually slowing down. So I would actually like to see that improve as well. Price action is going to be a leading indicator, but I would like to see, accelerating earnings, a sales growth. Good to see that estimates are up for next year. And fund ownership is in a nice trend. But overall, I would like to see those earnings come in. But I do like how this 1 week is standing out in terms of that volume spike and big outside week also. So one to watch as it tries to push through and push up through the right side of the space and try to approach that 23 pivot. So that is AGTI and ALKS, also a biotech. Not as pretty a chart, but once again, all these biotech stocks kind of had a nice move on Friday on good volume. Not as well formed here, a little bit whippier, but also a name to have on your radar. Amgen, kind of one of those liquid leaders, not really a pretty chart. And you can see it did break out a little bit, but this is kind of a downside wedge. I don't know what you want to call it. It's in a downtrend, and you just have 1 day of nice price action on volume. So this definitely has a lot of work to do, form some higher lows, and get back above those moving averages. Arch was one of the kind of energy names that acted pretty well actually last week. We obviously did have a pullback after a failed breakout through all-time highs, but you do have nice action on this Friday, trying to hold that 50-day moving average. And I definitely want to see a response here through this high. A lot of these names in the XLE space have really gotten taken to the woodshed over the past week. Let's just actually bring up XLE real quick. And you can see how quickly this fell from all-time highs, trying to push out here all the way below the 50 SMA. So this is kind of what you want to be watching for in terms of leadership groups, ETFs. If you start to see this distributive action, that basically tells you that a trend change, at least in the intermediate sense, is underway. And you want to be very careful when you are looking at industry group and you see this type of action on large volume, slicing through the 50 SMA basically from all-time highs. So keep that in mind. The oil and gas names have gotten hit pretty hard, but in general, Arch has held up better than most. Eris is an individual stock that's pretty interesting. It's within the pollution control group. This is kind of a lone warrior, so I'm always looking for overall groups that are acting well, and this doesn't really have that just yet, but it is a recent IPO that's pretty interesting and not super liquid. You can see, looks like, that's not very liquid at all, only 410,000 shares at $20. Not the worst thing, but I do like the price action. This day actually kind of broke expectations a little bit, but it is holding at 50 SMA and nice upside reversal bars here. Overall volume is increasing, suggesting that it's getting a little bit more liquid. And I'd love to see it kind of form out a base here under that 22 mark and then try to break out towards all-time highs. But I like to see that's above the moving averages when obviously the overall indexes are under distribution. And just pausing to see if there's any questions here. So I see a few overall, chart requests. I'll basically be taking that at the end. Dennis, I see you in the chat here. Thanks so much for tuning in. I made you a mod, so if anybody's causing trouble, you can take care of that. And we'll definitely take a look at SHLS and ARI, 2 solar names, and I think that's pretty much at the bottom of this list. Actually, ARI's right here because we're going alphabetical. So overall, take a look at the weekly here. This was a solar IPO. A lot of people are watching here, myself included. We kind of undercut this low and saw a lot of distribution basically falling from that 50 level all the way down to 5. So a pretty significant decline. But as the market has been kind of taking this last, 1.5 legs lower, you can see that this has been forming higher lows overall and is back above the moving averages and basically has a significant level right at this 14. So going back to a daily, let me get some water real quick. Looking at a daily, you can see the 200-day moving average is right here. So if we do push through this pivot around 13.96 on volume, that could start a new stage 2 uptrend. But we do have a lot of overhead supply going back to that weekly to sort through. So I do like to see that volume is kind of increasing here as we get down here. But, this one has a lot of work to do to get back to all-time highs, but definitely showing some promising price action back above the 21 EMA, 50 SMA, which is starting to curl up actually. But that 200-day moving average as well as the 13.96 pivot is something that's going to have to push through on volume. So that is ARI. Moving on, we've got AZPN, another. Actually, this isn't a biotech. This is computer software enterprise. Decent numbers here. We have a gap up, which is good to see. RS rating is 98. We're above the 50 SMA, which is rising. We had a pretty steep pullback here, but once again, one nice day of price action on Friday. The overall group is pretty weak, so I probably wouldn't focus on this one too much, but the overall price action, because it is in an uptrend. And going over to the weekly, it looks like it's right near all-time highs. Let's take a look at the monthly chart as well. So looking at the monthly chart, we're right at all-time highs. So this is acting a lot better than most stocks within this group and just the sector in general. Yep. So Dennis notes that ARI just got a new CEO. So that's kind of the end in Cancelim here. So going back to that stock, I think that's definitely significant and worth paying attention to in terms of a change in character in the stock. Moving on, we've got CRDO. This has been, once again, a recent IPO that undercut this significant low, which if you've read the life cycle trade, you know happens to the majority of stocks. Now we've got a nice gap up on earnings. No earnings surprise, but super strong results as well. Sales up 90%. So definitely the type of profile that I'm looking for in terms of earnings and sales and margins. Estimates are huge and estimate revisions are up. So this is kind of the template of what I'm looking for. It's above moving averages, and yeah, definitely one to have on your radar here. And the only kind of weakness is that the overall group is only 194 out of 197. So if this was a top 40, top 10 group, this would probably be number one on my list. But kind of 50% of a stock performance can be directly correlated to the strength of the sector and industry group. That's from O'Neill, a study that he did. And right now, this just doesn't have that going for it. But everything else in terms of earnings, sales, and price action even, although it does have a little overhead supply to deal with, is suggesting that this could be a leader. So one to have on your radar, and I'd love to see it get more liquid as well. Some big volume spike bars would be awesome. Moving on, we've got CWC Co., Cayman Island Company Development and Operations of Seawater Desalination. This is just above the moving averages. I don't like the look of this bar. It kind of broke that wedge. One big distribution bar. It looks like this needs to form a base, but decent action above the 50 SMA. And going over to the weekly chart, is above those longer term moving averages. So it's got some overhead supply to deal with here, but I like the push it's made, and it's acting decent given the overall market conditions. CYTK, some biotech names here, definitely choppy here, but going over to a weekly, I like how it's holding this moving average even as we're in a correction. Nice upside reversals on the weekly as well. Not too much distribution. You do have this one stick here, but overall RS rating is at 97. It's right near all-time highs. Let's go over to a monthly chart. So actually looking at a monthly, it's not all-time highs, but we're at some significant levels here, and this is all the way back in 2005. So even though there is some overhead supply, it's so far back in time that, I kind of treat it as if it's at all-time highs. So looking at this chart, I draw basically a line right here and watch that pretty carefully, as well as the 47.90 level. Moving on, we've got Dollar General, and obviously not a super fast mover, but it's kind of tight. You had an upside reversal on Friday on high volumes. So for the swing traders out there that are looking for, a decent ATR move, this could push up to 240 and maybe even complete the right-hand side of this base under 262. But not really a growth name, of course, but this is kind of what's working here. I think I also saw GO has been acting strong. I think that's on this list as well. So this type of theme overall has been holding up pretty well. DQ, another solar name along with ARI. And this also has kind of the China aspect going for it. Those names have been holding up quite well as well. And we're above the 21 EMA and decent action on Friday. Although going over to a weekly, you can see once again, a decent amount of overhead supply to deal with. But if it can push through this 80 level, it can definitely approach those all-time highs. And if you're a swing trader, definitely want to watch have a 2-2 reversal through this high sometime next week. So let me go ahead and pause to see if there's any questions. I know I'm going a little bit fast here. So let's see. How do you treat DTLs? I see you draw many straight lines instead of DTLs. I like straight lines a little bit more. I think it's kind of a more significant level. But I definitely use DTLs to kind of enter stocks early through their base. You can kind of draw it along the top of the base, and often there's a nice kind of cheat entry that lines up with that. But usually I just like horizontal lines a little bit different. And for DTLs, I'd love to see kind of 3 highs connect at a point. I think that's kind of the best possible scenario. But yeah, just to answer your question briefly, I prefer those horizontal lines. Oh, we skipped Duolingo. Let me go back to that chart because I do like the look of it. Going over to the weekly, you can see nice action. And let me hide this here. You can see this is also a recent IPO. Definitely some overheads applied to deal with here, but big upside reversals off the bottom on very large volume. Volume overall is increasing, so it's getting a little bit more liquid, and nice upside reversal last week as well. So you've got a key level right at 100. It's funny how that kind of lines up here, but I'll definitely be watching that, as well as this week's high, which is at 102.69, and we'll see if we can kind of push through and break out of this kind of low base. So on the daily, you can see basically what this looks like. Resistance right at this level, and nice action last week, especially considering what the overall market was doing. Ella and Vela Corporation, this was just a nice chart, pretty choppy. Once again, lower price name, just an uptrend, decent looking numbers as well. EMPH, another solar name, not quite as good as some of the others, but is retaking that 200-day moving average. EOLS, this is also in the kind of medical biotech space, and decent action, nice upside reversal here, then tight action the rest of the week. So it's compressing a little bit. I'm sure a lot of swing traders are watching through this high, through the 50 SMA, as well as potentially this high for a quick move through that 12 level. And you can see that this stock can kind of run quickly for a few days, although it does have the potential to also decline pretty sharply. So watch out for that as well to the downside. You can set your stop loss right at this swing low. Going over to the weekly, essentially go over to a monthly. Definitely some overhead supply to deal with, but if it does manage to push through these highs, I could definitely see it pushing and trending towards these all-time highs at around 40, but it has to get through that resistance first. So let me pause for any questions. Do you ever short things like Duolingo if they break down? From the IPO, it's definitely something that I'm looking for, just because the statistics from that book suggest that most stocks undercut that day one low. So if that kind of IPO advanced phase fails, it kind of makes sense to look for a short opportunity, especially during a correction, bear market, whatever you want to call it. But the short side is something that I'm still working on. Do you start a position in a pivot, or do you buy a stock when it breaks out? I look for early entries at the right-hand side of a base. So we call those consolidation pivots. Basically, it goes up, bounces back down, forms kind of a 3-day high, and then I look for a breakout through that level. Let me actually try to find an example here with Go. I think that's been an uptrend. So if you take a look at this chart, I try to find a spot like this where there's a few days where it pushes up, then gets knocked down on lower volume, and then pushes through on volume. That's where I would try to enter a stock like this, and this has been in a really nice uptrend above those moving averages. GTLB, moving on, this is another recent IPO that's still kind of in a downtrend, but looks like it's trying to fight over the past few weeks, few months. Upside reversal bars on these 2 weeks here, and going back to a daily, you could draw a DTL down here. I can be watching the 50 level. I think that's pretty critical. You can see it was rejected right near that right here. And then if it can push through that, we've got the 57 level as well as the 65 level as well to deal with. So definitely some work to do to kind of sort through that overhead supply, but definitely some nice volume coming into this name. Halo, another biotech. You can see it's above the moving averages, below that 45 level. Not really the cleanest looking chart, and definitely choppy. I think there's better options here, but it's in an uptrend, so that's kind of what I'm watching at this point, and it's acting pretty well considering the overall market conditions. HDSN, Hudson Technologies, above moving averages here. A little bit of a failed breakout, and then kind of a leak below the moving average here, so I don't like that too much, especially this day's action, but it was in lower volume. And then Friday was pretty tight on low volume. So I think where it breaks here from this day is pretty important, whether it kind of resumes this kind of consolidation, or if it breaks lower, then I think it's got a date with its 50 SMA or even its 200 SMA. But we'll have to see where it goes from here. And definitely you don't want to see it kind of undercut this level. Then I definitely think it could kind of just consolidate above that 200-day moving averages. But definitely nice numbers here, and once again we've seen pollution control come up a few times And not the best estimates for 2023, but really nice estimates for 2022. HHS, Hart Hanks Inc. Once again, not the best industry here, but this has been a chart that's been super strong and in a strong uptrend and has pretty nice numbers as well. Let me pause for some questions here. It looks like we've got some coming in. Yeah, no problem for my answer. No problem. Yeah, let's see. So for people kind of shouting out tickers, I'll take some tickers at the very end. Right now, I'm just kind of going through this watch list of 49 names that I kind of picked out from my weekend routine. All right, let's keep going. So HHS, nice move uptrend, a really nice volume coming in as well. You've got a nice breakout spot here. Obviously, it'd be nice if you caught it there, but you could this could always just consolidate, form a base, and then really break out if the overall market really turns around. Obviously, we definitely want to see a stronger industry group, but nice numbers here. Don't have estimates, and this isn't the most liquid name. This is very actually not liquid at all, so I would not trade this because you can basically see it's at $10, only trading at 22,000 shares a day. So definitely too illiquid for me. Moving on, we've got HNRG, a nice uptrend, nice action, upside reversal here on Friday. This is in the coal group, so along with kind of Arch, it's acting pretty well. And this is kind of a faster mover, a little bit whippy, definitely choppy up in here, but it can really trend once it gets moving. Super strong estimates for next year. Not the greatest quarterly numbers, but those estimates do kind of encourage me. And this could be kind of a performance enhancer within this group, although it's getting a little bit long in the tooth, this overall kind of energy trade. HQY, basically another kind of not leading group here, but you've got a decently clean and tight chart pattern. I'd love to see maybe one inside day, then a push through the 70 level that would kind of form one of those consolidation pivots that I'm looking for. And overall, not the greatest numbers, but a decent chart overall, above those moving averages as the market is pulling back in. HRMY, looking at the weekly, you can see is within this overall longer term base. It got rejected down here. It's kind of building once again, bounce off that longer term moving average, the 40-week, and we'll see if we can kind of continue that momentum and break through this pivot eventually and start to get back towards that 54 level. KDNY, you can see another kind of biotech. Once again, for people who are just joining, these are kind of faster movers. You don't want to be super sized in these because they can just gap down the next day on a failed trial or some other type of a news event. But they can also move quite fast as well. And there are a lot of them basically shaping up together. This is a group that I'm watching overall. And overall, super strong action here on this day, up 13.58%. Volume super strong as well. And basically, I'd watched it for some continuation, then maybe a tight chart pattern here. And then you could kind of buy on that pullback as it resumes upwards and breaks through kind of that high or on this reversal here. So that's what I'm watching for these type of names. And you can see the relative strength line increasing. That's another thing I'm really looking for at this time is an overall increasing RS line. The RS rating is good, 97. I don't care too much about the overall rating, more so the line and the overall price action. And just looking at the estimates, this actually does have sales, so that's good. Some of them have earnings, some of them have sales, most don't have either. So it's good to see that this at least is having some revenue as well. Moving on, we've got KRO, Kronos Worldwide. Decent move up here. It's kind of leaking and maybe needs to form a base near that 18 mark, but one to watch above the moving averages. Once again, that relative strength line is just screaming at you that this is acting super strong relative to the rest of the market. Great earnings and sales and great estimates for this year. A little bit of fall through in 2023, but overall, the price action to me is just what kind of draws my interest. And you had a really nice breakout here on this day, up about 9.34%. LNTH, I think a lot of people have been watching this. So I'm sure some of you watching right now have this on your radar and maybe even own it. It was acting super strong after this power earnings gap on huge volume, but then just kind of grinded higher and had some shakeouts here. And then this day to me kind of broke down from this kind of frozen rope feel and basically it leaked below the 21 EMA and looks like it needs another base in terms of, from my opinion. So we'll see what happens, but definitely want to see it hold above here and just kind of chop around 60 and kind of firm up as the overall market figures itself out. And then ideally kind of starts to move up once again and break out through this level. Moving on, we've got MAC, Merrimack Pharmaceutical. There's another one that's not liquid, so I'll actually just skip it. Moving on to MNTK, uptrend above a rising 50 SMA. A little choppy here, failed breakout, but we'll see if it kind of resets and forms out a base. And overall going to a weekly, nice push through this level, although it's below that pivot right here. So I want to see a retake here, consolidation, and then kind of a resumption of that trend into new all-time highs. Ollie, this kind of goes along with the dollar general theme as well as GO. Pushing off the bottom here, potentially starting a new stage 2 uptrend above the longer term moving average on decent volume. But you can see that that moving average has to kind of flatten out, and maybe this kind of goes inside and then finally pushes out. But on the daily, it's acting pretty well recently and is pretty tight and logical here. I think this is one of David Ryan's huge winners back in the day. So more of a mature stock, but still one to watch, and definitely acting well over the past few weeks. You can see basically it's an uptrend as the overall market is declining, and that is really shown excellently in that RS line. So that is Ollie. Moving on, we've got P-Lab, semiconductor stock, acting better than the overall group, but is pulling back very sharply, and it looks like it just basically needs another base, according to me. Moving on, PRM, another recent IPO, broke out through the short-term pivot on this Friday. Still has a lot of work to do to get to all-time highs, but you've got significant resistance right at 12.44, and also has to get through that kind of 12 level, which is kind of this close here, and you do have decent volume coming in. I like how on this day, even though it was a high volume and a red day, many people might think that's a negative, but if you actually look at the closing range, we're above that 50% level. So in terms of how I interpret that bar, it's actually subtle accumulation. Let me see if there's any questions here. Do I use Anchor VWAP? I do. I use it mostly in TC2000. MarketSmith doesn't have it. And I like to basically anchor it to significant bottoms, as well as the high of a base. If I had this open in TC2000, I'd anchor it right here. And usually, you know, it would follow the price down here, and then kind of that wedge pop above that line is usually a pretty good spot to enter up the right-hand side. So often that correlates with a cheat entry, DTL breakout. So as many indicators as you can kind of correlate to one single spot on the chart, more and more people are going to be watching that area and buying that breakout. So I definitely like to use the Anchor VWAP and putting it right at the top of a significant kind of resistance point. So looking at this chart, PRPH, Prophase Labs, you can see it's nice and trending above that 21 EMA, right at that 10 level, not super liquid here. And I'll actually skip this one because once again, not liquid. Keep that in mind, folks. You definitely want to trade liquid names above $20 million volume or more. Quick Logic, once again, not liquid. I'll skip it. RELL, nice action, but also not very liquid. SHLS, another solar name. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weekly. You've got a decent amount of overhead supply. You've got this significant level as well, just above here. But we're forming a decent uptrend above the moving averages. And going back to a daily chart, you can see a nice uptrend above a rising 21 EMA. 50 SMA is just about to curl up here. So basically what I'd love to see for this stock is for it to kind of push up here above the 200-day moving average and consolidate, form a little bit of a handle, ideally have a shakeout and close right at this high, and then break out through this 23 level and the 200-day moving average. I think that would be a really nice, strong price action. I like how volume is increasing as it tries to form this kind of bottoming pattern here. And it's above the moving average as the overall market is pulling back. So definitely showing relative strength, although over the past 12 months, you can see the overall RS rating is only a 38. So Dennis, that was kind of your answer. Looks good in the short term, but it has some work to do to get back to those all-time highs. And actually, I want to go back and touch on the fundamentals as well, because that's important to talk through. Overall, decent sales growth, accelerating over the past 3 quarters, margins improvement as well. Really nice estimates for next year, and a nice amount of funds as well, and 2 high-quality funds in there as well. So yeah, decent picture in terms of those fundamentals. SIGA, this is more of kind of the quick mover setup. You've got a super powerful move off the bottom on huge volume. Now it's kind of reset, formed kind of a flawed base inside bar on Friday. So, you know, those short-term day traders are looking for a blast off here through this high. But keep in mind, we could easily either break through that and completely fail, or just undercut this level and undercut these lows all in one bar. So you really got to manage risk tight with these ones. And once again, this isn't the most liquid name, although actually it's trading a bunch of shares a day at $12. So it's decently liquid, but once again, these are very quick movers. So keep that in mind and manage risk and position size accordingly. Next up, we've got SWIR, which looks like it pulled back to this prior kind of pivot area. A decent response on Friday. I'd love to see it kind of form out a base here at these levels, maybe push up, pull back, and then start to build out a right-hand side and have a nice evenly shaped base just as the market starts to obviously not go vertical here, but improve and restart an uptrend. And that would set up a really nice spot right under that 25 level, or just through these kind of consolidation pivots if that's your preferred way of buying. But decent action, nice volume here. I love to see this push off the bottom on large volume. This would have been a pretty nice spot to enter as well. And you had a quick kind of 7-day move out of that consolidation pivot. Moving on, we've got TCDA, another biotech. There's a bunch of these on this list. Basically consolidating right near that 10 level. You've got a significant point of resistance right here. And going over to a weekly, a lot of overhead supply here, but decent action last week. And definitely want to see it push through this area on volume. I'd love to see a big spike if it does break out here in terms of that volume, suggesting that institutions are kind of behind that move, but really nice power off this bottom and overall RS rating of a 99 despite this ugliness to the left of the chart. TRMD, one of the last kind of shippers holding up here. A lot of these have gone hit pretty hard and the overall group has fallen. So even though it's ranked 15th, I still wouldn't consider it a leading group because we've seen a lot of distribution in that area. But overall holding up, I'd love to see it kind of form a base above the 50 SMA. So maybe it firms up, has a bit of a shakeout, and pushes back toward all-time highs. Nobody knows. We don't have to predict, but you can kind of anticipate what will happen here. And I'd love to see it get back above that 21 EMA and hold above that 50 SMA as it pulls back, ideally on lighter volume within its base. Moving on, we've got Udemy, similar to some of the other IPOs we've been watching, potentially forming a kind of bottoming pattern here. Nice action on Friday, outside bar on looks like the highest volume since this day right here, and decent price action as well. So we'll have to see whether it can push through this area. And I would say the 13.68 level is pretty critical here. We had a failed breakout at this point, and I'd love to see it push through that on volume, fall through, and make its way towards that 16 level, which once again is a significant level of resistance. Decent amount of overhead supply here, but nice volume increase overall, suggesting that this is becoming more liquid and more institutions are interested in trading this name. So let me get a sip of water here, see if there's any questions. All right. Let's see. For stocks with large drawdowns, do you think we're going to have a lot of overhead supply on the way up? Do you pick those based on other criteria? So for stocks that have really fallen dramatically, you're going to want to see a big volume push at the bottom and for it to basically get back above those moving averages. There's going to be a lot of overhead supply, so they're going to have to fight through that, and likely at these significant levels, it's going to have to pause, chew through that overhead supply. So a stock at all-time highs is always going to have an easier time, doubling and tripling than these type of names. So keep that in mind, and that's a really good, important question to ask yourself. UTHR, really nice action. This is probably kind of top of my list for a swing trade next week if I do trade. Nice action here, consolidating against that 21 EMA as well as this prior pivot. You've kind of got two different reasons why it could find support here, and I'll be watching for a breakout through these highs on volume. Nice action and volume on Friday. Vivo, another biotech. This probably looks basically among the better of the bunch. You've got a breakout through this level on Friday. You've got that 28.72 pivot to basically chew through here. Nice volume on Friday as well. And overall, going to a weekly chart, it's pretty close to these 52-week highs, and going over to a monthly. Looks like the all-time highs are right here at about the 37 level. So it's not quite there yet, but decent price action and a nice move off these lows overall. So definitely in terms of biotechs, I think this is one of the more liquid ones, and really nice price action as well. So if it has an inside day, you could play it inside day and up to continue this breakout. Vertex, another one of the kind of bigger, more liquid names that actually have earnings, sales, and strong margins as well. Decent price action, although it still needs to firm out the base. So here is kind of what I look for, a breakout through this level on volume. And I do like the volume coming off these lows here, but these type of moves off the lows are tough to catch unless you're watching this very carefully. And after this point, I'd love to see some type of consolidation, and then you can basically buy the continuation of this kind of strength on volume. XENE, another name to watch here, a little bit of a choppy base, but going over to a weekly, you've got this gap up, and I'd be watching for a push through this level on volume. And once again, this is one of the biotech names. I know a lot of people were watching this, I think in 2020 or 2021, it had a really nice move, but is potentially setting up again, although it definitely has to approach the top of this base before it really gets going. So that's actually the bottom of the list. So I'll go ahead and take some tickers now to look through. So if you've got any names that you'd like me to take a look at, I think we'll go ahead and start with Zoom. I know somebody suggested that before. So this is kind of an interesting case, and it's kind of a case study in terms of stage analysis, where it made a super powerful move in a strong stage 2 uptrend, had a stage 3, started a stage 4 decline, and basically lost and gave back all of its profits. However, we're kind of forming higher lows as the market continues to sell off, and going back to a daily chart, it's holding up pretty well considering, you know, what the market is doing. So I'd be watching through a push through these levels. Once again, as we've talked about, there's going to be some overhead supply to deal with, but it's acting constructively over the past few weeks. All right, so we've got some names coming in, and Matt asks, have I looked at oil? We took a look at the XLE chart and basically talked about the distribution there. So that's pretty much all there is to say there. And let's go ahead and take a look at some of these names. I've got some Chinese names here, so let's take a look at Baidu. Overall, a lot of these Chinese names have pushed well off the lows, but I've always got trouble kind of trusting these names because, you know, there've been so many blowups in the past, so it's not really an area of focus for me. LI, I know, is a name that's been acting super strong off the bottom. Definitely needs a base consolidation, something here. It's basically straight off the bottom here, but really nice volume profile as well. And I think there was one other, PDD was another Chinese name here. Once again, nice push off these lows, but has to work through that 200-day moving average. And, you know, keep in mind that these are Chinese stocks and there is kind of a little bit of added risk, just like biotechs with these type of names. I saw Microsoft from, let's see, from Marco here. This is just kind of in a downtrend, basically reflecting what the indexes are doing. And yeah, basically has to restart uptrend, get back above the 21 EMA, 50 SMA, and for those to be rising beneath it for me to be interested in this company. In the same vein, let's take a look at AMD. This is very similar. Looks a little bit worse than the indexes, below the 21 EMA, 50 SMA, making new lows. So this is not a stock I'm interested in going long at all. If it kind of forms a bear flag back into this area and kind of breaks that to the downside, you could definitely short this stock, managing a risk right at this swing high. OpenSource.as says, don't forget to smash that like button. Thanks so much. Yeah, for sure. If you're enjoying the stream and finding it helpful, please go ahead and leave a like. That really helped me out. And it would kind of motivate me to stream a lot more as well. And of course, if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. If you haven't watched any of my interviews, that's kind of my favorite thing to do on this channel. I've got one with Jason Thompson, who's a William O'Neill portfolio manager, coming out next week. We're recording it actually tomorrow. So it should be out on Thursday or Friday. So if you don't want to miss that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And before we get too far into these names here, I also want to say once again, if you haven't checked out the Traderline conference that we'll be putting on in July, on the 9th, 10th, 16th, and 17th, is going to be a completely free conference. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm really happy with all the speakers who we've managed to basically agree to speak here. We've got Dr. Wish, Jack Schwager, David Ryan, Mark Ritchie, Denise, Jim Ropel. If you haven't watched any of his interviews, you'll be incredibly inspired. But basically, this is going to be 100% free and hosted on the Traderline channel. And what I want you to do right now is go over to this. I'll basically drop the link right now in the chat. And I want you to sign up to the newsletter here, because we're going to be kind of launching some additional info. We're going to be giving you guys special perks as well, some individual resources here. So if you don't want to miss any updates and you want to be the first to know about the conference, definitely go ahead and sign up to that newsletter. And we've got some more special guests to be announced soon, so keep an eye out for that. And like I said, there's going to be an awesome, awesome conference, and super excited to have a lot of these guys back and also hear from some new faces as well. So hopefully you guys are excited as well. And it's great that we're able to keep it free. And like I said, it'll be streamed live on the Traderline channel on the 9th, 10th, 16th, and 17th. So make sure you guys add that to your calendars. So with that, let's get back to your suggestions here. And let me see if there's any comments here. Oh, thanks, Dennis. Thank you very much. Ernesto, thank you. That's very kind. All right, cool. So yeah, Paul, awesome. Thanks so much for being a member of TL. Awesome. All right, let's get back to a few suggestions. And yeah, try to suggest names that are in uptrends. I see a few people requesting stocks are in downtrends. So as a requirement, let's say that we'll try to review stocks that are above their 50 SMAs. But let's go ahead and take a look at PayPal. That was requested here. Once again, this is just kind of in a downtrend, really ugly stage 4 downtrend as well. I'm sure nobody thought that, you know, such a blue chip stock like PayPal could fall so much, but it's basically gone from, you know, the 300s all the way down to 71. RS rating is 9, and this is just an ugly downtrend here. So maybe a great short through these kind of intermediate flags, but not a stock that I'd be looking to take along anytime soon and making new all-time lows last week. Let's see. BTU, I'll take a look at that chart. I know that was the energy name that I was watching pretty closely, but looks like a lot of the names, it kind of broke down. We had that breakout, then it undercut the 50 SMA and a decent close on this day. So maybe it firms out a base, but right now just doesn't look quite ready. You could kind of play the reversal here, but you know, I'd prefer to see some consolidation and kind of a confirmation from the overall group that it's kind of held up pretty well before I would play this name. So until XLE kind of forms a nice reversal and starts to move up again, I don't think I'll be focused anymore on those energy names. Dennis suggests LFG. That's one I've looked at in the past. Looking at the weekly, decently close to all-time highs. Nice close as well on Friday, off the 40-week moving average. So I'd watch to see a push here, then a little bit of a handle, and then a move up towards the top of this base. Going over to the daily chart, basically that corresponds to a push through the 50 SMA. Could be a power 3 there, and then consolidation below this pivot 2217, and then you could buy the breakout right through this level. And if you're curious about this type of setup here, I posted a clip on the Traderline channel from Charles Harris, who is a William O'Neill PM, basically dissecting how to enter a stock both through buying these consolidation pivots as well as pullbacks. And he does an excellent job about talking about how to build a position up the right-hand side of a base. And I would highly recommend checking that video out. I think I'll tweet it out on Twitter after the stream is done. Or if somebody's watching right now and knows what I'm talking about, you can find that link. It's been a pretty recent video that Traderline posted. So if you can find that post in the chat, that would be awesome. But if not, I think it's a great resource, and I'll tweet it out after this stream. Let's see. Let's take a look at RCMT. That was a stock that was running pretty hot, if I remember correctly. And yeah, super strong action off this earnings gap. Nice move, consolidation into the 21 EMA. Another earnings gap. So it's kind of interesting. It had two earnings so close together. I'm not sure if that's an error or what, but we had two gaps. Maybe they kind of pre-announced. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, a super strong move from 16 all the way up to 28. But now it looks like it just needs to form out a base. Ideally above its 50 SMA. So looks like it needs a little bit of time, and I could see it kind of undercutting 20, holding that 50 SMA, and then kind of forming out some type of structure. But because of this prior strength and prior move, definitely want to have on your radar, and we'll see how it develops after, you know, it forms a base, if it does. So yeah, watch it versus that 50 SMA, but I love to see these gap ups on volume. Great earnings surprise here as well. Great numbers. The only thing is actually its industry group is pretty darn good. So yeah, nothing much negative to say here, despite the fact that outside of the fact that it's pulling back and just needs to form out a base, but definitely want to have on the radar. Industry group, or actually fund ownership, is a little bit low, but we'll see if that can improve over, you know, the next few quarters. Let's see. Let's take a look at VERU. So this looks like a, yeah, medical products. So I like how it's consolidating against that 50 SMA, and it has a character where it can push strongly for a few days. So if you're a swing trader, you could watch for a push through these highs on volume. I like how volume is kind of declining on this pullback. The moves up are on high volume, and it looks like kind of, once again, one of those kind of rocket ship type stocks where it can move up a lot in a day or it can pull back significantly. So you got to manage risk and position size accordingly. This day was down 10%. This day was up, 182%. So keep that in mind. Doesn't look super liquid, although it's not too bad actually. You've got 31 million shares traded a day. And going over to a weekly, you've got a little bit of overhead supply, but this is kind of a pure momentum type play. And I'd be watching for push through these highs if you're into this type of setup. Moving on, let's take a look at Suave. Yeah, I think that's a decent looking one here. Looks like it's below the moving averages, but let's go over to a weekly. It's not super far off all-time highs. I don't like the look of this weekly bar here on very high volume. So it looks like it needs a little bit of time. Maybe it revisits this low or just pulls back to 140 here. But yeah, if it can form an inside week next week, get back above those moving averages, get through this level and get through this as well, then it's pretty close to all-time highs, and we've got a nice prior uptrend here. But it has to kind of recover from this bar, which is pretty negative from my point of view. Overall, in terms of the fundamentals, this is basically exactly what you want to see. Great earnings, sales, and margins, great estimates for next year. Decent fund ownership trend. You've got some IBD top funds kind of cutting position size, which is a little bit worrying. And overall, the price action isn't, it's not the best, it's not the worst. Right now, it's just kind of in a choppy stage one base. So yeah, it just needs to form out here, and not a stage one base, stage one phase. So we'll see if it can kind of resume a stage two uptrend. And to do that, it really would have to break out at least through this high as well as this high as well on large volume. Yep. So let's take a look at Ampy. Haven't heard of that one, I don't think. Amplify Energy Corp. Yeah, so super strong uptrend. While energy was trending, this was a super performer, but it's kind of a lower quality, lower tier name. You can see price is pretty low. And overall, it's just been a downtrend since energy kind of topped here. So yeah, definitely was a potential short through that 8 level and undercutting the 50 SMA. And this just needs a lot of time, a full new base before it'd be ready to go on another nice move. I'll take a look at NBIX, and we'll just take a few more here because it looks like we've been recording for about an hour. So we'll start wrapping up here. NBIX, another biotech, nice move on Friday. Taking a look at the weekly, you can see that it does have a decent amount of overhead supply. It's got to push through this level and this level before really getting going through that 100 level. And then I would like to see it get back above, and hold those moving averages. But decent area to be focused on, biotech. And just in general, for people who weren't here at the beginning of the stream, I mostly focus on solar names, biotech. Chemicals are acting pretty well. A few kind of lone warriors here and there. Not the best environment. We're still in a correction. But based on a few indicators, we maybe could have an oversold bounce. But everything has to be confirmed through price action, and you have to manage my risks. So let's see if we've got a few last good ones. I see LI here. We actually already talked about that one. Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Awesome. I'll try to do more of these. It's cool to be able to kind of ask you guys questions in person. Hey, Emilio, good to see you. Oh, that was actually you who asked for the last one here. Yeah, Dennis was able to find the Charles Harris video. So yeah, I think that's an excellent video to watch. And just the trader's journey video that he posted on his channel a few weeks ago, I think is a must watch for anybody who's interested in the market. It kind of, tells the true story about what this is like, and how it's not always, the easiest thing mentally and, financially as well. He suffered some pretty heavy losses, both in his personal life as well as his actual capital, with some significant drawdowns. So definitely watch that. I think it was probably the most powerful trading video I've seen, and definitely has some golden nuggets, some great lessons in there as well. So let's see, we'll just take one or two more here. Let's take a look at Tesla. I'm sure a lot of people want to talk about Tesla, so let's bring up that chart. Overall, the one positive for this chart is that it didn't form a lower low while the market did. So some subtle forms of relative strength there. Still, it's below a declining 2150 SMA, and the 200 SMA looks like it's just starting to tail down here. So it needs to get back above those moving averages and at least basically form a higher low here. Great numbers here, great estimates as well. But you've got some funds kind of cutting, you've got some accumulating as well. Just overall, I think it has to get back above those moving averages for me to be personally interested in it. I know a lot of day traders love this stock because it's so liquid, but for me, it has to basically start a short-term, trend to the upside before I'd be interested in. And for that to happen, it has to get back above that 21 EMA. All right, let's do one more here. Let's see what we've got. We already did PRM DOS, so if you can scroll back, you can take a look at that. Let's take a look at CAL. I think that was mentioned earlier, either on Twitter. Overall, asking pretty nicely. Nice push here, nice gap up on earnings. Pulled back. I think it pulled back a little bit too much for my liking, leaking below that 21 EMA. I'd love to see it kind of hold here while the market was pulling back, but not the worst thing in the world. It pulled back basically to this pivot, found support here. So you could play a push here through these highs. But I'd love to see maybe an inside day first and then a kind of reconfirmation through those highs. Nice volume on Friday, so that's definitely a positive. And overall, going over to a weekly chart, you've got a significant resistance level right at that 30 level. So if it does manage to push through last week highs, I think that's definitely in play here. Nice push into basically clear skies. And going over to a monthly, you do have a little bit of overhead supply, but overall looks pretty strong and isn't in the best group here, 173. But nice action, nice price action, and great numbers as well. Not really in terms of annual estimates, but definitely in terms of those quarterly numbers. All right. Yeah, Emilio, that 100 level, absolutely. That's definitely always a spot to be watching. All right, we'll do one more. I see ENR is in the chat. Yeah, this is very quickly, I can see there's just in a downtrend, not a stock I would want to be holding long here. Below all those moving averages going back to a weekly. You can see it's been a downtrend for a long time. So respect those moving averages. It's making basically new 52-week lows and maybe all-time lows here on the monthly chart. Yep, all-time lows. So yeah, not a stock I would be focused on. And it really have to get back above, this level for me to be really interested in this chart. So with that, I think we'll call it there. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Great to have almost 200 people here. It's great to have your questions as well. Dennis, thanks so much for being my moderator here in the chat and supporting me as well, sharing those links. That's awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Hopefully I'll be doing these more, most likely on Sunday evenings. Make sure if you did enjoy it to go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And with that, I'll see you guys on Twitter and in future videos. So thanks so much,